your comfort viewing to have in the background as you fall asleep on the couch.
The beer
Friday
slumber.
night, you know? As you fall deep into your beer slumber, wherever it is that you take your slumber.
A dry finish, so having that like Karakuchi,
It was inspired by sake.
be it good or bad, I don't think I have had any other beer that does it in this way.
Still hear me okay?
Oh, perfect,
Okay.
man. I love the
Cool.
smooth voice there. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's just your voice. The microphone is just like finally delivering the voice correctly.
It's the booming beer voice. It fills the room every time.
It's the beer voice per excellence, my friend. Like it's the voice that everybody will remember in the centuries for being the beer voice.
One could only hope. That would be the greatest honor bestowed to any beer explorer. Welcome back to Beer Brackets, everybody. If you haven't seen me at the VS battle, Sapporo versus Asahi, and now we are moving on. I could not wait. I have been dying to talk about Asahi. I've been dying to dive back into the lore. And today we are going to do it because this wonderful beer is going to be put under the microscope of a Beer Brackets beer review. And let's get right into it because Super Dry, I mean, come on. That term just alone is just legendary.
It is, my friend.
出来たてのこのうまさを世界最速で届けたいビールの命は
And there's legends around.
There
it.
are.
There's legends.
I want to let you start because I love it. You seem like you're excited. I love when you're excited about a legend.
I do have a small legend that I was able to find.
Please, you start.
I'd heard about this in beer pilgrimages around, like in my beer readings, but it was all brought back to memory when I purchased the beer. And here on the bottle version, as you can see here on the top, it says I don't know about the can, but it says here there's this word Karakuchi.
It says at the top of the can too. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was hoping you
probably
would know what that meant
mispronouncing it.
because I have no idea.
I happen to know, my friend.
This
I happen
is
to know.
perfect. This is perfect. This is. I love how you always put a beautiful bow onto like our beer history and our beer stories here, man. It's just perfect.
So kind, my friend. So Karakuchi is a Japanese word that can be used to describe many things. It's a word that means many, many things. But in the context of a beverage and beer specifically, it means refreshing and dry.
Ooh.
That's what it means. And it's usually used to describe like something that pairs very well with food and that allows you to enjoy the beverage, but at the same time enjoy also the food. And that's what Asahi has kind of like taken on as a mission. So try to make this beer in a way that the flavor is hitting your palate quicker than any other beer normally does, allowing for a very quick dry finish, so having that like Karakuchi, so that you are ready. You're ready to either take a bite of food and enjoy all the food flavor perfectly, or if you're not having food, get ready to have another sip.
Right.
Which is a genius. It's a genius strategy.
That's beautiful. That is very beautiful. And you see that term super dry. You know where that comes from, right?
I'm not sure, my friend. I thought it might have some connection with the Karakuchi context, but concept. But I'm not sure.
So,
I'm not sure.
Asahi makes a very, very bold claim that is the world's first ever super dry beer. You hear a lot, you hear the word dry thrown around a lot with certain beers. So what dry refers to is, of course, the finish, right? So this sort of like very, very quick, non-lingering finish. So they put together this super dry technique. You know what is inspired by?
I'm not sure, my friend. I'm waiting. I'm really, really waiting here on the edge of my seat.
According to Beer Legend, which we know is the most reliable source of information.
Information.
It was inspired by sake. And so they wanted to take the very, very dry, clean finish of sake and reproduce that in a beer. Because at the time, I mean, Sapporo is the oldest brewery in Japan. And we know from doing our VS battle and reviewing Sapporo as well that Sapporo definitely has like an oily sort of a very wet finish, right? And so they wanted to replicate the effect of having that dry finish on sake. And that was the inspiration for it.
Both of those legends kind of like collide into saying that this is a beer that is really meant to be enjoyed with food, because having such a dry finish like is really elevating the food experience to a different level, something that they strive
100%.
towards.
Even though Sapporo kind of dates back earlier than Asahi was actually the first bottled beer. Sapporo was basically just strictly a draft beer offered through keg. So the Super Dry was created in 1987. There's always a German connection. During World War I, German prisoners were actually enlisted to work in the Asahi brewery making beer. So you would have to think that some of that influence, even though they're prisoners of war, you would have to think that while they're there, they might be like, hey, you're doing that a little wrong. You'd have to think they'd implement their ways and their beer knowledge.
So that's smart. See, you utilizing foreign intelligence.
Right.
Speaking to the core of German people, where it's like, you can't. They just can't help themselves. Like if the beer is not made correctly, they're going to tell
say
you
something.
It doesn't matter if they're prisoner or
even
not.
though they're a prisoner of war, and who knows what would happen to them for speaking out. It's like, excuse me, sir, this beer is not to the quality that I prefer.
Having done a VS battle, like we can at least say that there's definitely some interesting characteristics to this beer. So it's going to be exciting to do a full review.
With Sapporo, we're talking about how it's kind of like brewed all around the world. It's not necessarily brewed in Japan anymore.
Yeah.
Do you know where my Asahi is brewed?
No, where
in
is it?
Italy.
I hope you were going to hit there. That's what my bottle also says, product of Italy.
It's brewed by Peroni in Italy.
It is. Birra Peroni.
Isn't that funny?
SRL. Yeah, it's very funny.
Oh my God.
It's
like, we think we're reviewing this Japanese beer and then all of a sudden it's like, we might as well be drinking a Peroni. So, to your local beer, my friend. Your native Asahi.
Cheers.
Here we go.
There you go. See?
It's so strange. This whole modern beer world of being brewed under license is such a strange thing.
Well, at least, my friend, we can say that now we're reviewing exactly the same beer. It's brewed in the same facility. It's just not exactly close to where we are.
Right. That's right. Normally, yeah, you're right. Like with Sapporo, mine was brewed in Canada. Yours was brewed in California. Yeah, with this one, at least we're getting the exact same version. That's true. All right, Aroma cheers. What do you think?
Aroma cheers, my friend.
Karakuchi.
It's Karakuchi, right?
Very Karakuchi.
So the aroma is very interesting. I don't know. I find like the hop presence on this is very distinct. There is some malt presence, but I think that the hop character is what and call it the more like herbal, floral. I like how you described it, like when we did the VS battle. Like it's very inviting to me. Some of those elements in other beers are way more prominent. Here we're just talking about very small subtleties, but yet they're present, and I like that. So I think I'm going to start with the 2, my friend, because it's quite inviting. It's more than a middle-of-the-road beer. I like the way it's inviting me in the glass. What do you think?
Yeah. Like you said, very sort of like, the hop characteristics come through, so you get some floral elements there. It's definitely not your run-of-the-mill mass-produced sort of macro lager. There's a very interesting but very subtle, very, very subtle aroma, but what is there is very intriguing. So for that reason, I was actually thinking about doing a 1.5, but because it's actually relatively unique for what it is in its space compared to its peers, go with a 2 as well. I'll match you on that. Yeah, that's fair. All right, cheers, buddy. Let's go in for a taste.
Cheers, my friend.
Yeah, we were talking before we started filming about this and these beers, and like, it's so hard to come up with descriptors for these. They're meant just to be drank with food. These beers are perfect for that. So on its own, it's like, how do you describe this?
I think the taste is what really shocks me compared to a lot of other similar, if we want to, put a category for this type of beers, lager, where the descriptors are very minimal. They're meant to be enjoyable, drinkable. You can pair them with food. The taste is really shocking to me because you get this burst of malt and hops quickly, but it fades And super dry, it's a great way to describe it. I can't think of any other word other than Karakuchi.
Yeah, it's very Karakuchi.
It completely dissipates without talking about finish. It's just you take a sip, less than a second, and the flavors are gone.
Pretty amazing.
And that's very unique. Yeah. It's hard, but just because of the novelty of how that happens, I think I'm going to go up to a 2.5, my friend.
Oh, really?
That's quite... No, I am.
Wow.
It's almost like the finish is happening in the taste.
Yeah.
You almost have no...
There's no distinction there. There's only one...
Yeah.
There's a first half to this beer, and that's it.
Be it good or bad, it's extremely unique. I don't think I have had any other beer that does it in this way. It's not perfect beer territory in that sense, like for that category. Yeah. But I think it deserves a little bit of a boost.
I don't think I can... I appreciate what you're saying, and I see what you're saying, and I understand your enthusiasm. I think every time I've drank this beer, it's been out of a bottle, straight out of a bottle, or straight out of a can. And when you're drinking this out of a can, it's just, you just get, it's really refreshing, but you don't really get the full effect that you do from pouring it out like this, where you can really, truly appreciate how that taste is out, that, that super dry, that Karakuchi. You're right. The novelty of it's really interesting. Just what we said on the aroma, some floral aspects from the hops, a little bit of malt, but it's almost like it's borderline flavorless with a little bit of those characteristics, which for a 5% beer, it's not even a light beer like 4 or 5, it's 4 or 4.5, it's 5. It's normal. It's, it's not a light beer. And for a non-light beer to get away with this like this is very impressive. But I understand why you bumped it up, but I just can't justify it to myself. I think I'm going to go the 1.5 just because there's not a lot there, but I really like it. Beer Brackets tradition, do a mouthfeel refresher.
Time two.
And what do you think?
It's well done, but like you said, there's not a lot of characteristics there, which can be a good or a bad thing depending on where you're coming from.
You could easily drink a lot of this beer. If you're out one night at a bar, or a restaurant, or a pub, you could just, and there's pitchers flowing, and you could easily drink a lot of this.
Carbonation is great, very refreshing. Whatever was left from that like super quick taste already is cleansed by the carbonation, so there's very little left. The carbonation just cleanses off what's left. So I think I'm going to stick with the 1.5 because I think it's well done.
Yeah, man, 1.5 is really fair for the mouthfeel. I think there's like, that sharp, really sort of like crisp carbonation. It starts off at first when you first pour it out. There's a lot more to it when you first pour it down into the glass. There's kind of like a really nice, like foamy, soapy head. But then that dies down relatively quickly, same as the Sapporo. And then what you're left with is like a nice sharp carbonation, almost like a nice carbonated water body to it. There's enough like, little bubbles there. A little bit of astringent bitterness from the hops. But so I think a middle of the road average 1.5 I think is where I'm going to go with this one. But now the finish. What do you think about the finish on this one?
So the finish I think of this beer is particularly interesting because there's
the Karakuchi.
There's not a lot to discuss.
Yeah.
And that's probably what's interesting. The only element that is present is this like slight bitterness that lingers. And it almost you almost have to wait for it because normally if you would have it with food, you wouldn't really quite perceive it.
Yeah.
It's quite enjoyable to me. It's kind of like the surprise at the end of this great experience. So I think I'm going to go with the 2, my friend.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting because there's not that much there, but just the novelty of the Karakuchi, just the novelty of that super dry finish is enough where I'm tempted to almost go to a 1.5, but because it's so, and if you've only had this beer out of the bottle or the can before, I definitely recommend pouring it out, getting the full experience of this to be able to really understand just how well this is done and how quickly that finish just sort of cuts off so clean, so clean. And just for that, for the amazing novelty of that, I'm going to bump it up to a 2. But as an overall beer experience now, buddy, from beginning to end for the Asahi Super Dry, what do you think?
As always, like this is where a lot of things come into place. Something that has shocked me both in the VS battle and today in the review is this very unique experience that this beer delivers, and particular sharp flavors this beer has. Like in I think in the VS battle, I mentioned how you have those very sharp edges and clear defined characters. That character is very unique. I can't think of any other beer that delivers the same type of experience. So because of that, I'm going to bump it a little bit higher than I normally would. I'm going to give it a 2.
Nice.
It is really interesting, and I'm very excited to go back and try this with food and really enjoy the experience that provides.
I think I'm almost trying to convince myself to like why I should give it a lower score than I want to give it, because it's like as a reviewer, as beer explorers who have tried like all these world famous beers, all these Trappist beers, like craft beers, we've tried them all. And so, we have all these different experiences and we're trying to apply it to something like this that is so subtle. And so there's the temptation to be like, well, because it's subtle, there's not a lot of character there, mark it down, right? But that Karakuchi, the super dry effect, it's just so well done. I couldn't believe how every sip of this beer from beginning to end, I'm like, that's interesting. That's interesting. Wow,
right?
That's interesting. Like every single sip is a reminder of how well that's done for a 5% beer. I'm going to go with a 2. No higher than that, just because, it's not playing with stronger flavors and it's not balancing those. I don't think it deserves higher than a 2, but it definitely doesn't deserve lower than a 2 either for what it's done. All right, calculating our final scores here for Asahi Super Dry. For myself, it came out to 2.83 on 5, which in our rating system is a good beer. And for Mr. Alessandro, it was higher. It was 3.16 on 5, so he bumped it up into the 3s, but in our rating system, it's still a good beer. And man, I gotta say, our rating system, again, this rating system you designed, perfect. These one-word descriptors for these beers cannot be more perfect every single time. Everybody, let us know down below. What do you think about Asahi Super Dry? Is it a go-to of yours you appreciate? Is there a Japanese beer that you think is a little bit better? Let us know in the comments down below. Whatever you do, click that beer bell. That'll let YouTube know when we're in the pub. If you want to join us, you want to have a beer once a week, when we're in here hanging out, you can join us, have a beer along with us, or just listen along. If we're your comfort viewing, to have in the background as you fall asleep on the couch.
The beer
Friday
slumber.
night, And you, as you fall deep into your beer slumber, wherever it is that you take your slumber, if that's the case.
No matter what, don't forget to close your beer brackets.
Never forget. Cheers, everybody.